Hello, everyone. I'm Suchitra Vijayan, and it's an absolute pleasure and honor today to be a part of this incredibly important conversation. The way that we're going to set up this conversation today is I'm going to make a brief introduction and then very quickly hand over this conversation to our brilliant scholars, our panel of brilliant scholars, activists, writers who are here today to speak about an important book in a series of important books and artworks to emerge from Guantanamo. Today, we will be discussing Guantanamo artwork and testimony and the recent book that's come out, which is Deaf Walls. But the story of Guantanamo doesn't start or begin and end with Guantanamo. There's a much larger history for us here to reckon with. And I thought the best way to start today's conversation is actually to quote Warscape's Michael Broner, who, when writing about this event today, said, and I'm quoting Michael today, "We convene amid Israel's merciless onslaught in Gaza. I find myself spinning with the sense of seemingly unrelenting cycles of hate and inhumanity that have marked my career in journalism and film, and a full circle with the passage through Gaza, West Bank, Israel, Yemen, Guantanamo, and Iraq." So it's not only important for us today to mark this incredibly important book, but to realize and understand that we have to place this event, this book, this work in the larger context. Long before Guantanamo, there was the Attica prison riots, and from Attica prison riots, we go to Abu Ghraib. And through that, the cycle is not just Gaza, Yemen, Afghanistan, and Iraq, but what the entire infrastructures of impunity and incarcerations did to the entire world. The idea that we have a category called forever prisoners should tell us where we are in terms of thinking about what happens to a body or certain types of bodies that can be disappeared, taken away, and then reduced to nothing more than a series of archives of legal petitions where we are still trying to justify what happened to them. As we think about Guantanamo, as I said, it's not just Guantanamo. Guantanamo is simply a moment which is part of a larger trajectory of histories of incarceration, especially histories of incarceration that deal with the empire. The other thing that I really wanted to bring up is an ex-detainee from Abu Ghraib, Abu Man, in one of his interviews, says that he wasn't sure if he would ever come out alive from Abu Ghraib because he was never given a Red Cross number. And to quote him, he says, "If someone wasn't given a number, he remained in a situation of deferred death." Just like categories of forever prisoner, deferred death, language itself sometimes colludes with the idea of oppression for us to justify what happens to these bodies. And it's important for us to understand that it's not just Afghanistan, Iraq, Yemen that have been places where these bodies have been disappeared and rendered completely, it has been disappeared. It's also important for us to understand that these infrastructures of impunity have spread across the world. And a lot of the things that we continue to grapple with, especially the work that we do in places like India, is to understand that this category of people who can be disappeared is no longer just certain bodies, not just at the imperial outposts, but in democracies like India, in places like the US, UK, Britain, where citizens are now being increasingly disappeared under the same rules. And for instance, in India, where we work on political prisoners, one of the things we have to understand is that the Patriot Act then becomes the blueprint for laws like POTA, then go on to give the state absolute and unfettered power to really do whatever they wanted to do with bodies of people. And today, as we engage with the artwork and testimony, we are here to also engage with the broader contours of what happens to right-bearing citizens. What does it mean for someone to be a forever prisoner? What does it mean for law to completely disappear someone away? But more importantly, what are ways for us to resist? Where does the idea of art and testimony come in for us to resist? And with this, I'll very quickly end my introduction and make way for our brilliant, as I said, our brilliant panelists today who make up writers, scholars, researchers, activists, and who will go on to not only set context of the book, but also continue this conversation about what happens in places like Guantanamo. We have Safiyah, Rochelle, Alexandra Moore, Elizabeth Swanson, and Mansoor Adayfi. So without me talking anymore, I'm just going to hand over this conversation to our brilliant panelists today.
Thank you so much, Suchitra, and for giving us that larger context and for creating a forum for this event. Thank you to everyone for being here. I think we're each going to try to speak fairly briefly and then give a chance that hopefully people in the audience will have questions and we can respond more fully. So I'm going to start by just talking about the project and how it came to be, and then I'll hand off to Elizabeth. So there was an art exhibit at John Jay College in New York of Guantánamo artwork, and that's where I first saw Moath's work. He is a prisoner at Guantánamo who was brought in January 2002 on one of the very first transports and has been there and never been charged with a crime for 22 years. Not only that, he was cleared for release in December 2021 and remains there. So I always take a moment to think we're talking about it now, and he is still there. He is still there and still inaccessible. So I had seen that exhibit. I know one of Moath's attorneys, and I've also seen the work up close in the curator's office, and I brought a group of students to see that. And when Moath's attorney reached out to me to say Moath would really like to write about his artwork and what it means to him, that felt like a really important project to take up. And I immediately thought of Elizabeth, because we have done many human rights projects together, the most recent of which before this book was on witnessing. And so that seemed like that would be helpful to continue our collaboration and try to do justice to what Moath wanted. But it created a quandary, because how can you do a book with someone who you don't know, cannot access anything about whom there's no reliable information? You can't ask questions. You don't speak the same language. You can never meet. You can never discuss. So in the book, we try to foreground those questions and the kind of ethical stakes of the project, and how we tried to bring his voice forward in a way and engage with it. So very much I want to say this is not a book about Moath. We really want it to be a book with him, although we recognize that it's probably not the book that he would want. I think he would love to have an art book with full color photos of all of his work. And but you know, this is, I hope, is a start to a conversation, not the last word at all. I also want to say that that the book has chapters from many different people. The curator, a fellow artist, Mansoor, you'll hear from directly, who knew Moath in Guantánamo, and share a homeland from Yemen. They're both from Yemen, and both involved in the art program there. Scholars in art history, Safiyah in law and visual rhetoric, in military defense waste, and Moath is a hunger striker. So there's a really beautiful essay about wasting away and creating art from waste. And I think Safiyah will talk more about that later. So we tried to open up a lot of different perspectives on the artwork. There's one really large gap, and there was an author who was going to write about Moath's work in the context of Middle Eastern prison art, and she became ill very suddenly and passed away while the book was in process. And so I just want to acknowledge that gap. We had the choice of either to delay the book and to try to reach out for more essays, or to move forward. And I think for Moath, it was more important to move forward. But I certainly miss her voice. I guess I'll just say a little bit more about the process, which is that Moath wrote about his experience as an artist and what it meant to him in a series of short essays, which came to us translated. And we compiled those into an essay with the help of two brilliant student researchers, Maya Gamer and Olivia Vinson. And then there was a lot of back and forth, comparing different translations, talking with people who know him to get the cadence of the voice, organizing, sending it back to Guantanamo where it had to be cleared by the censors, and then Moath having the chance to sit with the printed pages and say, like, no, it has to be rearranged this way, and then all that funneling back. So know that it's a complicated process for sure, but that he has the words that are there in the book are the words that he knows too, and that are his words, and that he has approved to the extent that that makes possible. And the last thing I'll say before sending it to Elizabeth is that there is a prohibition right now on describing artwork in Guantanamo that's still there. This is a little bit hard to wrap your head around, because the forces at Guantanamo used to send media on an art tour. Artwork used to be displayed in the media tours. So now that you're not allowed to describe it, it's a little bit hard to figure out. But Moath's testimony was cleared before that prohibition came into being. So what he's describing is something that he would no longer be able to. And I've never seen it, of course, because I don't have a security clearance, but there were parts that were not cleared for release that he tried to describe in the essay that had to be cut. So again, we await his transfer, and hope that next time we meet, it will be with him and he can fill in all of those blanks. And with that, I send it over to Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Ali. Thank you, Suchitra, for having us. Thank you all for being here today. We do believe this is a topic of utmost importance. And I will echo Ali that we came to it because of our very long history for about 20 years, working on literature and human rights, trying to center the voices of survivors always at the forefront, and following a lot of ethical principles to do that. I will not speak today. I have the great honor of just sharing a bit of Moath's words that come directly from the essay that Ali described the process for. And it is my tremendous honor to have these words in my mouth and share with them today with you, knowing that in addition to all the torture he has survived, the ongoing torture of having been cleared for release 2 years ago and yet remaining in that space is almost unfathomable as I try to bring his voice to you. So this is a description of the beginnings of his art making. The first thing I noticed when I entered the cell in 2010 were its deaf walls with no window for air or sunlight, no way to know if you are under or above ground, or to distinguish between day and night, as if you were in a grave and everything alive got disconnected. I paused in the middle of the cell, confused, thinking about what I could do to get life moving inside the dungeon. I thought of home, the old life, agriculture, greenery, plowing, and all the tools that recall our ancient heritage, the axe, the sickle, the water wheel, and the old mill. Old, beautiful things, especially arts and crafts, attract me to meditate and to think without feeling, an essential skill in this place. I have to make these deaf walls speak. This was the beginning of a journey that was full of thorns. At Guantanamo, my beginning was not that of an artist who establishes artwork with brushes and paint and a natural vision. It was bitter and difficult. And the main reason I started was because I could make others hear my voice and my pain in this place, this exile in which you feel that you are imprisoned on another planet or at the bottom of the ocean, in complete darkness where no one can see you or hear you. Loneliness, estrangement, sickness, pain, all in a place where conscience is absent, where everything is outside of the law, in the country of law and freedom. And I will close with a passage that he closes his piece with, which is about what he hopes for his art in the world. I wanted people to change their mind about people here. The widespread idea is we are criminals. We cannot create anything beautiful. We are enemies of heritage. People think we know nothing of art and know nothing about life and are not productive, that we have nothing to show. They wouldn't believe we believe. I made these things to change people's minds. I am asking you to look at my artwork before you judge me. I hope you can take a look at the ships I have made to see my artistic sense in the little details, and also to take a look at my sculptures and paintings. I want to make beautiful things, to give a beautiful idea of people here. This artwork expresses our characters, who we are. What they hear about us on the outside is not true. I would like people who are biased against us, I would ask them before judging us, take a look at our artwork. And with that, I will pass to Mansoor.
My turn, huh?
Yes, it is.
Okay, before we start, السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يا هلا ومرحبا رحبا حياكم الله أهلا وسهلا ومرحبا مليون. This is a piece from Yemen. Today is a special day. So I would like to give you a piece of art from Guantánamo too. It's like it's a song. Which حبا حبا باللي جاء باللي جاء والله يا مرحبا باللي جاء باللي جاء حبا حبا باللي جاء باللي جاء والله يا مرحبا باللي جاء باللي جاء. The song says, welcome, welcome by the one who come, welcome, welcome to he who comes. Basically, this song, we sang it for years and years and still sing it until that day at Guantanamo. This is one of the very first songs we sang at Guantanamo for each other when someone arrived at Guantanamo, especially when the people arrived to Guantanamo for the first time. And we knew what they were thinking, because being on a long trip, beating, hooded, gagged, and the moment they landed, there would be seas move in the camp that we would sing in the blood, keep singing. And when they imagined they arrived and they would hear the people sing. So they thought it was a summer camp. So when they brought to the block, like, what are you singing for? We thought they were in the cages. First of all, thank you so much for this an important event. This is not about just Guantanamo or Moath or art from Guantanamo. It's about us all, it's about our humanity, because now, as you see what's going on in Gaza, I believe this is one of the most critical moments in human history. So Guantanamo, only one of the cruelties that it was created and is still going until now. That Guantanamo, one of the biggest human rights violations in the 21st century. So I have only 2 minutes, so I have to go to Moath and the book. First of all, I would like to thank Alexandra and everyone, Elizabeth, and all of those who give Moath a platform and a voice. And it's not just for Moath, it's for all of us. It is voice for humanity, because as you know, Guantanamo, one of the most secretive prisons in the world, and censorship. And I know that Elizabeth and Alexandra went through a lot when it comes to publishing, writing, but working on that project, and because the censorship, the classification, and so on. As art from Guantanamo, because art before Moath. We, as from Guantanamo, consider art from Guantanamo. Let me see the time. Consider art from Guantanamo one of us, like a living being, because that art was born in the end of the ordeal of Guantanamo. Art, we hid it, we fought for it. Oh, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, because we hid it, we fought for it, and we got punished. It was used as evidence against us. I remember when we draw on a styrofoam cups or clamshell or in a toilet paper, that will be taken. The guards would come with the plastic bag, gloves, masks, and put it there, ISIN number, the date, the translation, and that will be used as evidence against us, regardless. We used art as a way at the beginning, because imagine you arrive in a place with everything taken from you. You become just a number. And what makes you who you are, one of the traits that make you who you are, your talents, your skills, your knowledge, your experience, your memories, your emotion, your relationship, your name, your value, your faith, your dreams, your ambitions. That's what makes you like a unique person. So at Guantanamo, we start sharing what we have, the skills, the knowledge. That would help us to survive in Guantanamo. One of the things, we start singing, dancing, also drawing. There was no pens. Sometimes we used the styrofoam, sometimes used the tea powder, sometimes used the soap, So that's how the beginning was. And there wasn't any art classes or art were allowed. Even if you draw something in your letter or anything, that you will be confiscated and you will be deprived or sending letters to your family. And everything at Guantanamo will be examined by experts, by deciphers, by poison specialists, and it has to go through a process of censorship and so on. If one rejected at some stage, the letter will disappear forever. So that situation from 2002 until 2010 was the dark age. The more we stayed at Guantanamo, the more we were distanced from who we are, distanced from our previous life, from our relationship, from our knowledge, memories, and everything. And especially for Moath and the rest of us, where we spent most of the time in solitary confinement, we missed the things that, we missed, like the blue, beautiful sky, seeing the sun, feeling like the sun rays, like this, we take for granted. So in 2010, the golden age, when Uncle Obama failed to close Guantanamo, we negotiated with the camp administration. I was in Moath on the force feeding. So I'm not kind of get to him like, let me talk about art. So they started, we negotiate. One of the negotiation was art. I remember the first time we negotiated, they said, your guys are terrorists. You don't know how to paint. So we had pen and paper and we draw like, wow. They said, yeah. So we started, getting the art class. At the beginning was only pen and paper, then demanding negotiation, and so on. We got art teacher, we got art supplies, and so on. And the art revolution started. The art yesterday we used to fight for. Today was official, was like there. But also going to the art class, lots of restrictions. You have to go to the classroom, chained, shackled, and when you paint in the classroom twice a week, 45 minutes. And when you paint, you don't know what would happen to your painting. It might get confiscated, maybe disappear, maybe whatever. So the art went through the same process with censorship, get stamped, get a number, and get a proof or sent to death sentence, like execution, disappear forever. So art for us was one of us, but art actually at that time was really important. It's one of the way help us to survive. Art connected us to ourselves, to our memories, to our emotion, to the world outside. It was a way to escape the feeling of being in Guantanamo. When you paint, we started painting the things we missed most: the blue, beautiful sky, the sea, homes, stars, the things that we missed, the fruit, because painting at that place, like you are finding a small piece of you are, of your humanity, that because you were treated just a number. And at Guantanamo, everyone look at you as a terrorist. And I spent years and years trying to prove that I'm a human being. I'm a good person, because everyone think that you're a bad guy, that terrorist, that a killers. At some point, Priscilla, I said, I didn't give SH wherever. I'm tired of proving that. I didn't care whatever you think. We were young. We tried to, because imagine someone told you are the worst of the worst. How many will get killed? How many children? I remember one day in the interrogation room, when one of the interrogators, he brought, a pile of paper, and he was hitting me. He was telling me, this is the name you killed in 9/11, and this is the children's name. And today, we see in Gaza, sorry, but we need to talk about this. Thousands of thousands, tens of thousands have been killed, and the massacre genocide is still ongoing. And I wonder sometime if the interrogator would printed those names and would ask Israelis why they killed those people, the way he used to hit me and ask me the same question. So during the golden age, we started painting, and many of the prisoners. So Moath was also, let us go to Moath now. Moath, very, the first time I saw him in Guantánamo, I didn't see him. I heard him sing in another block, so beautifully singing. Sometimes he would lead the prayers, and the guards would come and like, can you please ask him to sing? Sometimes when we on the force feeding chairs, and the guards, Moath is not that talkative with the guard because he couldn't speak English. So I have good relationship with the guard. They would come to me, would say, for form, please, can you ask 0 to 8 to sing? So Moath, the guard request, he said, okay, I will start singing. I could see the guards would sit on the floor, raise their heads, and just like that. They said, it takes away. They didn't understand the words, but the rhythm, the beautiful voice. So Moath and Guantánamo started, making stuff of cardboards, shelves, cabinets, windmills. And one day, because Camp 6, as he said, was, American very smart, and they have a lot of money. This is the problem. The international law forbid to build prison underground. So what they did in Guantánamo, they built a prison on the ground with the description of underground prison. So when you are in the cell block, there's no windows. The only light on the ceiling. It gives you a feeling that you in a hole underground. It's like building inside building, the inner building at the cells, no windows. So what Moath did, he made 2 windows to the east, to the sunrise and sunset. And you can open them, you can see birds, you can see seas. Sometimes he would change the painting from time to time. It was so beautiful. And and his cell, it became like a piece of art. Everything decoration, he would curtains, the a windmill, and he can't even control for the AC because too much, it was cold. So he made the cardboard. He cut just block the opening of the AC with the string. Also, he put some scent like perfume in front of the AC. You can smell so nice. So Moath started working for others. Then in 2013, when we went on hunger strike, they shut down the communal living. They devastated. They almost destroyed all the art, most of the art we did. In 2015, I met him again in Camp 5, and he started at that time making the ships. So I was his employee, but without payment. So sometimes he would send the guards. The guard would say, "Hey, for one, yes, in the middle of the night, 1 or 2 p.m." I said, "What?" He said, "Your brother 028 said he need the breakup, or he need the socks, or he need," and he said, like, "What he's like? He is working." Moath was on hunger strike, so when he, tried to distract himself, he go to work in sheds, and a lot of work, and he's very detailed, very perfectionist. And sometimes when the guards weren't allowed to give him the scissor, so Moath would say to the guard, please cut here and cut here. Do not ruin it. Do you understand? And they're like, okay, calm down. And sometimes Moath would watch. Look what you did. I said to the guard, can you give him the scissor? So we said like the noise. And he would start, if they're a nice guard, like it's not allowed to give him the scissor. See, he will start cutting. He said, look, watch me how to do it. So the guard said, I'm going to tell my mom I have a new boss here. So sometime when they cut the cardboard, Moath would sing for them, like, just make them fun and so on. So, Moath, when I ask him, like, he would make the ship out of nothing, garbage, paper, t-shirts, plastic, bottle plastics, cardboard, and I think he had like 2 bags full of garbage, and anything can be useful. Moath can turn anything into that piece. So I worked with him in 2015 and 16. So, just remember his wife just died 2 days ago, and that's what like sad news, and he just learned about it. And I know Moath like very, very sensitive person, very, very funny, but when he's sad, he won't show it. So when his sister contacted me that the father died and they called him, it's kind of like really sad, because he was waiting to see his father for the last 22 years. His father was waiting for him too. And today we are talking about the book, about him, about his artwork, and he's not here. And this is really sad. Like for the last 22 years, Guantanamo is still open. There is no justice, no accountability, not even no rights. So yeah, this is briefly about Moath and the artwork from Guantanamo. The art from Guantanamo also, we try to bring through art to bring the voice of the humanity in Guantanamo. And I wish for the next time we are doing something like that, Moath will be with us together. Yeah, so I take 3 minutes more. Okay.
Thank you, Mansoor. And Safiyah, you're going to show us some of the work, right?
Sure, yeah. If we can get the slides up on the screen. Maybe slide 3 would be a good place to. Yeah, that's great. So thank you all for this conversation and this opportunity to speak about Moath's artwork, and just to, I suppose I'll talk a little bit about how I approach the artwork and my contribution to the volume, and maybe just a little bit of how I even came to this. So for years, I was researching Guantanamo Bay and the visual politics of the camp, mainly from the perspective of, or looking at state-produced images of the camp. So, here I'm sure what comes to mind are those, initial images of prisoners of the camp in the orange jumpsuits with the blindfolds and etc. And I was really interested in understanding the role of those images in actually really justifying the camp and sustaining the camp and everything that occurred there. And while I was doing this research, though, I was very much aware of the fact that there was also art being produced by prisoners within Guantanamo. And it was always, a very intriguing aspect of it for me. And I remember reading a quote by Moath where he talked about the role of art in terms of being able to actually, allow him to feel free within those confines. And that always stuck in my mind. But I wasn't able to, have any sustained sort of research in it until Ali reached out to me for potentially contributing to this book. So I was really happy to get the chance to explore this angle, really looking at the role of art in Guantanamo in breaking through that visual rhetoric that was so strong, that is so strong in the camp. So briefly, what I tried to show in my contribution was first how there is this very existing and very powerful visual archive of the camp, where again, these state-produced images play a really central role in structuring how it is that we understand the camp, how it is that we understand prisoners, where, you know, at once they are highly visible and subject to the eye of the state, but then at the same time they're erased and they're disappeared, and that is also part of the camp's logic as well. So in this context, I wanted to think about how Moath's art can and does intervene into that visual archive. So thinking about how it resists and challenges, but also reveals the work of the visual in actually, you know, sustaining state power and violence in the camp. So in that vein, I think, you know, for myself, it was very important to think about his art, in particular his model ships, as building an alternative visual archive of the camp, as being artwork, as being resistant representations, as being expressions of, you know, claims to freedom amidst the worst of conditions, but as also really actively building, again, an alternative archive, a different way of viewing the camp, a different way of viewing prisoners and detainees of the camp, and a particularly powerful expression in a space that is so mediated by violence and so mediated by state power. So, you know, his art is remarkable for many reasons. And Mansoor, you talked about this, how it's actually crafted from what you can say is, you know, garbage, or from the materials of his confinement. So from, you know, ordinary but also personal material sources. So, you know, dental floss, wooden skewers, prayer beads, mop yarn, all of that goes into building these sublime and incredible renderings. But in particular, I was also struck by how Moath also talked about how he also wanted, you know, the stamp that is signifying state regulation and state power to also be clear in his artwork, right? Where he wanted that to actually be a part of the piece as well, so that people would know that the ships come from Guantánamo, not only literally come from Guantánamo, but they are a part of it as well, right? They carry part of the meaning of that, but in being produced by Moath in this way, they also sort of disrupt that visual rhetoric that exists so strongly in the camp. So I think if you go to slide 5, there's a closer sort of a close-up of the, yeah, exactly. So that stamp, that state censorship kind of stamp, which for me is such a powerful part of the artwork as well. So on the one hand, you know, his ships and the sails and everything they represent and conjure, which are very strong and powerful representations of movement and expanse, of freedom, of mastery over oneself, and you know, anticipation, etc. They're not only expressions of refusal and representations of freedom made even amidst the most severe conditions of confinement, but they're also, again, really in a powerful way reveal the very conditions that produce such resistance and expression in the first place, right? So where state power relies on visual practices to legitimate the camp and structure the camp, but it also reaches its limit when it has to encounter these artworks, where his art actually can be used and is used to look back at that power, to seize the power to look and to see, and also the power and the right to be seen as well. So that's what I tried to bring to the book. I hope that, you know, there are some questions or conversations that we can get into that dig a little bit deeper into these aspects. But yeah, I'll end there and open up the floor for any conversation around that.
Thank you so much. Before we jump into the questions, I think Michael Broner has a request for Mansoor. He says, for those of us at home who want to sing the song to our kids every night before bed, can you please send the lyrics? So yeah, we need the lyrics, Mansoor, for the song so that Michael Bronner and others can sing the song.
Okay, I can send you my voice. I can sing it for you. But hey, it's coming in the next book, Letters from Guantanamo. It's an audiobook, so it's there.
Perfect. So the question that I have, I kind of want to put out for the panel, and then we'll start taking our audience questions, is one of the themes that seem to emerge from all of your readings, your presentations and talk, is the idea of the state going out of the way to erase not only the person but also the humanity of the humanity of the prisoners. And yet every time they do it, they emerge as stronger, more resilient figures of freedom, dignity, and resistance. I was wondering if all of you, in your own ways, kind of respond to aspects of this that you saw while gathering this book, the aspects of this in visual representation. Of course, Mansoor, you were there. So maybe we can start with that, and then we can start taking more questions from our audience.
Elizabeth, do you want to speak to that?
I'd be happy to. I would say for us, for Ali and I, our great privilege was to be sort of working with Moath. As Alexandra said, we didn't ever have any direct access, but we had indirect access. And so just in the process of care, I mean, Mansoor, you're talking about, this is a perfectionist we're talking about here, right? And so I'm going to say it took us 6 years to get this right, mostly because of all the apparatus around Guantanamo, but not only, because Moath was also a very powerful voice in saying, this is going to be right. This is going to be my voice as I want it put forward. And so as Ali said, towards the end, we sent what we thought was a very finished draft of his words, and with the utmost care of trying to capture those just as he would want them. And it came back to us in a completely different form, which was so powerful. So the agency that he describes in his work and that he's able to take and that he took with us is one piece of what we witnessed in terms of a humanity that cannot be denied, although he was describing the most dehumanizing conditions that you can imagine. And when, Mansoor, you said, the force feeding chair, kind of just tossed it off, that, what he went through with all of the forms of torture that he endured, including hunger, striking, and being force fed while he was making art. I'll just close by saying that he withstood all of that. And for me, Safiyah, when you were just doing your beautiful presentation on his ships, I mean, I want to make clear to these audiences that they moved, the pieces moved. And that for him was the moment he talked about the most freedom, that he had made ships where the sails would fill with wind and the ship would move. And that for him, that was a freedom. He said that he went out and for the first time he felt free as he watched his creations move. But the amount of frustration that it took to get there, not having the materials he needed and having to improvise and rip it apart and do it again. And he says, and this is one of our case, we make the case in the book, this is material evidence of his suffering, of his torture, of his experience, because he will say, my sweat is in those ships, my blood is in those ships, my everything is in those ships. And when he was able to make them move, that was a close to a feeling of freedom that he could ever gain there.
Mansoor, would you like to come in?
I will let Alexandra to.
I always feel like we should defer to you, Mansoor, but I guess I would just also say to your comment, Suchitra, that it's also working on this. It also is so difficult because you just feel again and again, why does somebody have to prove their resilience, their resistance, right? And so, I think that he describes in his contribution, which is the most important part of the book, obviously, that and the pictures of it, of the artwork, that, you know, it's his intention and it's his expression out of that evidence, as Elizabeth said, of what he's thinking and feeling. And I'd also just echo what Mansoor said early in his comments, that Mansoor has written about this, and Moath does as well, that the artwork is, you know, is imprisoned the way that detainees were imprisoned. It's not clear the extent to which if a detainee or prisoner is released, their artwork will be released. And so there's this very complicated relationship between the maker and the artwork, where they sometimes use the language of, you know, this is like a child that I make. It's also an expression of me. And also, I think Elizabeth might remember better the exact words that Moath uses in his essay, but you know, he talks about, my life is finished. I just wish my artwork would be free. And, you know, people in prison, Mansoor can speak to his own experience, but, you know, they were in prison when they were very young. Mansoor was 19 years old, Moath slightly older. So, you know, to have that feeling, and then the artwork is something that physically moves in the ingenuity of his construction, but also symbolically moves, or they wish it would move, maybe even in ways that they cannot.
Yeah, I just want to say, Ali, to that quote, that he was asked the question, if you could get out or your artwork could get out, what would you prefer, because of the ban on releasing artwork now? And he said, my artwork. And he said, my life is finished. Those words, when we got those back, I remember that day, how devastating that felt, that answer to that question, and that propelled us even further. And so to be here sharing it with a public audience is a thrill, because for him, that's what mattered. And that felt like life to him.
And sorry, I know we have to go on. I just want to say that the government has now said that a reasonable quantity of artwork can be released.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I'd like to add something that, you know, for Moath and for the other artists, art is really part of them, because they put their emotion, their tears, their sweat, they work tirelessly on, you know, the art meant a lot to us. It's not just a piece of art as a piece of shape, it's a piece of you, actually. So it is something part of you. For example, Moath wants people to know what kind of person he is. So he said, yeah, I want art. If God choice, my art would leave, because as when he looked at his life being isolated from his family, from the rest of the world for like 20 or 22 years, and what waits for you there? Because I know the work Elizabeth and Alexandra went through to get the work done. There was no direct communication with Moath, and really hard. And what Moath has to say is has to go to his lawyer, to the secret facility, and sometimes the secret facility won't allow everything to be said or to be conveyed to Alexandra and Elizabeth. And the lawyer again will go to the secret facility, take it back, get approved, get it to the lawyer. So the process of getting his voice, his words, is also tiring, and it shows what to extent the government is oppressing those prisoners. You know, I remember one time we have the same lawyer, and when Moath talks about his ice cream flavor, and it was classified, as something like, because that considered to threat to national security. Imagine one of these examples. So for us, to be honest with you, art was really, really important. And one of the hardest moments at Guantanamo, seeing the art was destroyed by the guards, confiscated, torn down. That was really hard. It was really hard and difficult. So it is who we like. It's who we are. It is one of us, basically. And I can see how Moath really, really spent. Like I told you, he can work sometime 20 hours non-stop. So what you see here, it takes a long time. You have no materials, absolutely nothing. You can have stain, isomat in his clothes. There's like injury in his nails, in his fingers. You sometimes with his teeth and with everything, you can see the his cell also like a mess. So like only small place was he pray, sleep, and the rest of it is work. So they are deeply connected to his artwork, and I understand when he say he would let his art leave instead of him, because leaving that behind, it like leave a piece of you there.
Safiyah, would you like to come in?
Sure. I mean, I don't know what I can add to that. I think, the speakers have captured really the role of art for, not only just in general for people who are in carceral conditions, but also in particular for prisoners of Guantanamo, where there is such a, it is so thoroughly committed to the dehumanization of prisoners and detainees that any artwork specifically created in those conditions where, as the speakers were talking about, it is really a part of the person, right? It is a part and parcel of the person. It resides within them, both materially and symbolically, etc. That, in particular, that represents a specific kind of threat to the state, right? And a real need to silence those voices and to disappear that artwork and to restrict access to it, etc. So yeah, to echo what was said already, just the fact that we're here discussing it and looking at it and viewing it and thinking about it and having it in this public arena is an incredible opportunity to push back against that extent of dehumanization. Yeah.
Oops, Suchitra, we can't hear you.
Oh, I am so sorry. I keep doing this where I keep putting myself on mute. We have a question from Bhakti where she asks, is there a difference between using writing rather than art for advocacy around human rights? Sounds cynical, but I wonder if artwork somehow harder to interpret.
I'll say a brief something about that, and then others can add. I do think there's a difference, and I think in the introduction, Elizabeth and I try to speak to the ways in which having Moath's testimonial chapter, but then also engagement with the process and images are really, really significant. I don't know if this is me overreacting, but I also have a little trepidation in answering too much more about her question, because he's there and his artwork is there. And, I would love to see them both free, all of it free, to talk about what it means. And so I do think it's really, because of the materiality of the artwork that Mansoor and Safiyah have talked about, it is actually bringing evidence of the conditions out, but I would hate for that to be a reason why it couldn't be released. I mean, it's everything they said. Bottle caps, you could see in that detail that I showed a minute ago, cut up plastic cups, string, bits of mop, cardboard that was initially glued together with soap before they were allowed to have glue. So it's not dangerous materials in that way. And I worried about making it seem more telling if that would hinder its release. But again, I recognize my own too far down the rabbit hole in this stuff too.
National security imagination, but maybe, I think to the question, Bhakti, it's, of course, the writing can signify in ways that the art cannot. If you pick up our book, which I hope you will, which does have the centerpiece of Moath's testimony, he then shares in words that can explain how the work bears the evidence of his torture. And so in a term that Ali has called evidentiary aesthetics then, but you couldn't necessarily fathom that from the art itself. So I think your question is well put. And thank goodness we have the testimony to go with the art.
So I will add something. Sorry, I'll continue, Elizabeth. Sorry.
I was just going to say it was a real feat. It's a real feat that it got out, right? I mean, it's incredible to me to this day that we were able to receive his words from there. So,
yeah. So I believe that, when the artist, the art writing also is another way. It's an art too. But when you come to the painting, for example, if you look at a painting hundreds of thousands of years ago, the art is a soul's language. That painting is speaking to your soul, so you could feel it, you can interpret it. At the same time, there is emotions frozen there, time, tears, secrets. So you can put in the painting more than in the writing. So, for example, if I want to write from Guantanamo, it's not going to make it at all. I was lucky my draft of the book made it, because we have to go through the law. It was like legal letters. But through the painting, you can see what he tried to convey. It's not just the ship itself, the way it was made, the materials, the time, the perfection, the message behind it. It's a lot. You can, the painting, the craft he did can speak more than just words. Actually, the words need to explain the art or the paintings.
Safiyah, do you like to come in, or should we go to the next question?
We can go to the next question.
The other question that I really wanted to talk about was this, that really stuck me when I was reading the book. This is something that Michael Broner in his introduction to this conversation talks about. It's something that was referred by the panelists today. It's when he says, I want people to know we could make something beautiful, right? Could you kind of frame this in the context of why the idea of making something beautiful becomes so important here, given not only the 20 years of dehumanization since 9/11, but also the much longer prehistory of this dehumanization? What does it mean, this powerful sentence, the capacity that we could make beautiful things? Mansoor, would you like to come in, and then we could kind of go around?
Yeah. So basically, at Guantanamo, being taken in Guantanamo as at early age, and spending years and years and years going through hundreds, maybe thousands sessions of interrogations, treated by the guard, by interpreters, by medical staff, and so on, and treat you like a threat, that you are nothing. The news they got about you, and the system itself, the systematic treatment, the torture, the abuses, it takes your humanity. So also, it makes you. I remember at the beginning, we look at Americans through Guantanamo, because these people, like, this is Guantanamo scope, and unfortunately Americans also look at Muslim through 9/11. So what kind of people they are? They torture, abuses, beatings, and so on. So you try to tell the people what kind of person you are, because even at Guantanamo, when we arrived there, around 800 men, we had no shared life. We didn't know each other. I didn't know Moath didn't know me, and we had no shared life. We started building a shared life, a shared memories, a shared friendship, brotherhood at Guantanamo. The more you stay, the more you get a number, and you try to. You're not even a human. Like, there is no justice, there is no court, no accusation, nothing. So I can see we tried at the beginning to convince everyone, the guard, the camp staff, the interrogators, we are humans, and so on. Because the horrible things they would say that about us, sometimes they will put like photos, videos, you did this, you did that. The part of the dehumanization, we tried, it's only natural that you try to prove that you are a human being, that you have feelings, you have dream, ambition, families, and so on. But nobody recognized that. Just like the way you are treated, like daily, chained, shackled, masked, 2 guards, pepper sprays, dogs. It makes you, even the guards, you can see the guards sometimes they get nervous, the way they treat you, the measures that reflect on you, like, why are you doing this? There's nobody treat you like a human being, even give you like a food or water or light whatsoever. It makes you that every single day, remember that you're a human being, that you're like a monster, killer. So part of that, we try to prove our humanity through whatever we do, try just the way we treat anyone else. But that wasn't even acceptable, even by the guards. You have to be professional, don't treat him like, professional means be careful, because they would tell the guard, if you take your eyes 1 second, they will slit your throat. Imagine you being taken to that place, being told those guys going to kill you at any time, at any moment, if they get a chance. The guards also were nervous all the time, to some of them afraid of us. So sometimes, but later on, when the guard lived with us 6 or 8 months, they would start laughing. Your guy nice, because what they were told and the reality didn't match. Didn't all conflict. Didn't conflict. It's conflict the reality, because when you live with the prisoners, watch them eating, drinking, sleeping, suffering, crying, because every single day, those guards also humans. They could, they could tell who's bad, who's good, and so on. And one of the problems, they felt bad and they felt guilty too. So part of that, you try through the art, through the message, through your behavior, try to prove that you are a human being. And you have to do that over and over again, because new administration, new guards, new rules. The only time we felt our humanity when we met with those lawyers, like it took us time to trust them. It took us time to believe they were lawyers, honestly, because why would we believe them? Just it's another interrogator. Because sometimes the interrogators play the role that they were lawyers, they wanted to help. So the trust was really hard, it takes time. But I remember when Aunt Beth, Jacob, and Andy Hart, I trusted them. And Andy Hart because my best friend. Aunt Beth, Jacob, she's like a mother to me now. So that started in Guantanamo, but it takes time to trust. When someone gives you a piece that you have lost, piece of humanity, your humanity, that would the lawyer give us there. But the system at Guantanamo, the rules, keep stripping that of you, just remind you, everyone saying that you're a monster, that you're a killer, that you're a terrorist. So through art, through painting, through writing, we tried to prove that we were human. We could write, we could do beautiful things, we have dreams, and so on.
Could I just add to that, Mansoor, building on what you were saying about the denial of humanity? I've just been teaching the Holocaust survivor and psychoanalyst Dori Laub and his work on supporting people who have survived atrocity. And he describes something that he calls the 81st blow, which is after a film made by a survivor who said, you can survive 80 blows, physical blows to your body. The 81st blow is the one that will kill you. It's the one of the listener who will not acknowledge your truth, who will not recognize. And so for you, what you're describing is the 81st blow, day after day after day after day. And we certainly heard in the piece that I read from the conclusion of Moath's essay, that sense of I am here to tell you our heritage, our culture, our love, our care, our humanity. And I think I'll just say, Ali, I don't know if you'll agree with me, but I think to try to mitigate that 81st blow has been the lifeblood of our work together, to bring forward the voices of those who would be denied.
We have another question about the prison administrators, and did they support making of the art? And then at some point realize it was a public relations threat once the outside world paid attention. So what was the relationship between the guards in relationship to the artwork that was being produced?
So this is for me, right?
Sure.
Yes.
Like, first of all, I would like to say something. We were not the only victims of Guantanamo. There were many guards, many campus staff. They were also victims. And anyone would try to stick to their humanity because as I told you, many of the guards sometimes they would come to apologize to us, said, guys, we are sorry. This is not our country. This is not who we are. This is not America. And some of them actually sympathized with us. Some of them tried to help. I remember there was a love story between a prisoner on one of the female guards. So when the guards started seeing the artwork, it started not just the art, the painting, the singing. I told you, the dancing, and sometimes we would sing together with the guards, nice guards. We sang for them. They were asked to sing. There was sometimes competition in sometimes. But when the people, I think, when they saw visual art that takes them, I guess you can see it because it makes you think. It grabs you. So when they start seeing those paintings, they loved it so much. Even the administration, they created their gallery at Guantanamo for journalists, for tours, special room. They said we give them art, those. So basically, and sometimes some of the guard would come to me and said, "Hey, please, can you ask your brother Sabri or others or Rabbanik? I love that painting." So I would ask the brother, please, that guard ask for that painting. Can you give it to him? So some of the guard, they got gifted in like some paintings, shapes, and because they loved it, they fascinated about it. I told you, but the demonstration, they tried to take advantage of that. We didn't mind. They said we are trying to help them. They didn't help us. They make it hard and difficult. I remember one of the culture advisor. His name was Zach. He said that detainees painted weapon, and I told him I challenge you to bring a single painting of violence because I couldn't see honestly. Like if I saw something, I would tell you. I swear I never saw a single painting that reflect violence because you would paint whatever you want, not whatever you want. It just you put yourself there. They tried also to, the administration or the US government use art that the way how they treated us. It's a part of their. It wasn't. They make it difficult, confiscation, threats, and so on. But some of the girls actually loved it. They got gifts from it. They, some of them actually didn't care much, destroyed it. So it depends on the person, basically.
I might just give a more prosaic answer as well. That at first, I think, as Mansoor spoke about earlier, detainees were creating out of whatever they had, making indentations on styrofoam cups, which, as he said, were collected as trash, things like that. Then when Obama took office, there was an art program that was instituted that Mansoor has written about as a PR attempt. And also something to occupy detainees. Then there was the John Jay exhibit in 2017, 2018. Yeah. The curator, Aaron Thompson, also has a contribution in this book, which I think really explains the complications around that. And due to the response from that, then the government cracked down on displaying art, letting it circulate, letting it be released. Free the captive art, yes. And now the most recent ruling has been that a reasonable amount can be released with the detainee, but no definition of what reasonable is. So It's been a trajectory, and it's very much reactive against public sentiment and attention, I would say.
Exactly. Like they censored up in Guantanamo. Even after Guantanamo, when the art was freed, like as Alexandra said, the first art exhibition was at John Jay College. The government, the Pentagon threatened to burn art from Guantanamo. And since 2017, when Trump took over, they banned art from leaving Guantanamo until 2023, when we contacted, the UN and the UN rapporteur Fionnuala. She contacted State Department that they said, reasonable quantity. And, I don't know, like I think when one of the artists was released, Rabbani, they confiscated around 60 paintings of his artwork. Still, they cannot take everything. Khaled, I think he has 1,000 paintings, and Khaled actually become very talented. What he actually now, make art on stone. He take one of the stones and he would start making sculpture. Also, would take some cardboard, mix the dirt with the glue and start painting on it. So he has a lot of art, which actually can weigh a lot of weight, and I don't know if they can allow him to take it all.
I just want to add one word to this discussion, and that is the word arbitrary. So whenever you say, Ali, and Mansoor, a reasonable amount can be released, that's where you see our US government shifting from the rule of law that it claims to follow to being an arbitrary, exerting an arbitrary power, which is exactly what Guantanamo is, 1000%. And it's the entire structure of law and human rights are set up to prevent arbitrary treatment. And so we are in it in the most horrific ways, as you all know. But yeah.
I think I'm just gonna kind of do like one last question, kind of brings together all of your important works, is the idea of language that is used. Whether the language, as Safiyah was saying, so much of this was about the state-mediated narrative of what's happening. So I have questions for all of you about the idea of language. One, a lot of the work that you do is also centered around the idea of human rights, right? You're constantly trying to fight this idea of, yes, we live in a rule of law structure, but then Guantanamo exists outside of law. How effective is the law and the language of rights and freedom, mostly the idea of democracies having human rights as a language for us to have a conversation about what's happened to people like Mansoor, to Moath, Mohammadou, and many, many others in Guantanamo and other places. So the last question is about language, and I would love for all of you to reflect on that.
Safiyah, do you want to talk about that?
Let me start, so you can.
Okay, after Mansoor.
So, the United States, when they started the language, they started manipulating the language when it comes to Guantanamo. Because, when you deal with Bush administration, they were not just acting like that. They have their own, I think, legal advisors, lawyers, and so on. When it comes to Guantanamo and to war and terror, they started, for example, one of the terms they used, the language of the change in the terminology, which is, for example, rendition. They call it, the kidnapping of prisoners, they call it rendition. The torture, they call it enhanced interrogation technique. The prisoners, they call us detainees. At Guantanamo, for example, when they call the interrogation, they call it reservation. The hunger strike, they call it non-religious fasting. The forced feeding, they call it assisting feeding or internal feeding. The solitary confinement, they call it single operational cell. So the language is really, it's really important, and the government did really well to change the terminology and to manipulate the terminology when it comes to Guantanamo. For example, enemy combatant. What's enemy combatant? Those men whenever in the battlefield, whenever being held any guns or battlefield fighters. But again, when it comes to Guantanamo, everything gets changed upside down. So I would, guys, Safiyah, take it from there.
Yeah, I would say it's such an important question, and it really goes fundamentally to what Guantanamo even is, as you were saying, Mansoor, right? So one of the things I try to show in my work is, as much as there's a narrative around Guantanamo as extra legal, as existing outside of the law, which is true, especially when we think in terms of human rights, it also very much exists within law, within legal regimes, within legal reasoning and language. And one of the ways in which we see that is the way in which the state is constantly changing and shifting language to justify its actions, right? It would be, one would think, pretty easy for the state, maybe not so popular, but to do what they wanted to do outside of the justification language that they make use of, right? But they use language in such a way, I believe, because it's a way of legitimating the camp once again, right? As making it seem within the confines of some kind of, legal reasoning or language that we can understand and we can identify and we can sort of come to terms with. So, yeah, language is vital to Guantanamo, and in as much as it allows for the camp to exist, I think it also reveals the work that it takes, right, on the part of the state to actually, you know, continue to justify it and to make it seem like a reasonable sort of space, even when we know what occurs there. And I think that's why the artwork as well, if we want to understand art as a form of language, which I think it is also so important, because it's also, once again, a way of resisting that play of language and word and terminology, and speaking back to power in a way that reveals what is really occurring in this space, and what is being suffered by people who are on the receiving end of this play of language and etc. So yeah, I think it's vital to understanding the camp. Absolutely.
And I would just add, I would bring us back to Orwell, who showed us that language is at the heart of authoritarianism, that if you can say black is white and war is peace, then, you know, and that you can do that. And so it feels like the entire journey, you know, that's why testimony is so important, testimony linked to truth, and the idea that you're trying to bring forward a truth, the maddening nature of doing that in our world today. And I would just direct us back to Gaza for a moment. And the people have, I think Michael Bronner, you might have used the term, it's a kind of madness to live in the space we're living in right now, with the closure on discourse that would name what's happening there for what it is, etc. Likewise with Guantanamo, that's why you see people coming out with, you know, Mansoor's writings, people trying to write and say, no, this, and we have the evidence to prove it. But you are in a war in this moment where language has, you know, boy, Orwell couldn't have dreamed up the evacuation of meaning that we're in right now. So I would link it to a much broader fascist project.
Yeah, absolutely.
So please go ahead.
No, I guess I could just say one brief comment, which is that Guantanamo can be seen as outside the law, but also as hyper legalized. And so the more that I have seen some of it firsthand, and certainly learning from so many other people, and so many people that I admire deeply are on this call. So thank you for that. But I also see people recognizing the imperfections of law, but still struggling within it, because that's one of the tools we have. So I guess that's one of my takeaways, that it's easy as critics to condemn the failure of law, but it's also has been incredible for me to witness some of the defense attorneys and other people struggling within a deeply, deeply flawed system.
Thank you all so much. And as a way of concluding remark, one thing that really stuck with me while reading this book, having read Mansoor's work, having read Mahamadou's work, is that what you're seeing, again, Guantanamo is not just a place. It's not the exceptional place, that there's so many Guantanamos today exist across, and they've proliferated. And I just wanted to conclude with one of the instances been last year 2 years ago, when we were in India trying to speak to political prisoners. This is an incredibly young and brilliant activist who was released, was speaking to us, because this was Muslim students who were picked up after the Delhi pogrom. And one of the moments he talks about how no newspaper was allowed, so he would pay for newspapers to be sent, and the prison, the guards in charge would actually cut out any news about him in the newspaper, cut it out, and the newspapers that would arrive, because this was a time when the entire country was in a frenzy. Donald Trump had just visited India, so every time he would get newspapers to get news about what was happening to him. And again, you pay for these newspapers and you pay more, and they would cut out all information about him. And then he would end up with a newspaper with cut out things in front of him. And again, these stories of this absolute cruelty is not just an exception, but pretty much proliferates all of our carceral systems. I also want to I'm so sorry we didn't have this really beautiful question about from Mohammed Adnan about, I think it's Mohammed Adnan. It says, do you think that Moath's art making became a symbolic transgression of the imprisoned, to which the prisoner's body and its mannerability are reduced? I'm so sorry we couldn't take this question, but I can see that Elizabeth has already responded to that. I want to bring this conversation to an end, knowing that while this conversation ends, the discourse and so many incredible people having these conversations and continuing to work on this will continue. I want to thank all of you for your time, your work. It's been an honor to be in conversation with all of you. And thank you so much for Bhakti Shringarpure, the Radical Books Collective, for doing this. And I also want to say that there is a discount coupon that you can get. So please write to decolonizethat@gmail.com for the discount code. And I also suggest, if you're an educator, if you're a teacher, please consider using all of these books and materials to teach and educate, because I think the parallels between what happened before, what happened in Guantanamo, what's happening in Gaza today are uncanny. And as always, we educate, agitate, and organize. Thank you so much.